Have you ever noticed how a negative emotion can dominate everything in seconds? An out-of-turn comment, an old memory, unexpected news. And of course, suddenly something inside you changes. The body becomes tense, breathing shortens, the mind speeds up. And the strangest thing, it doesn't seem like we were the ones who chose to feel that way. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine that at the very moment that anxiety arises or anger begins to boil, there is a simple, almost silent sentence capable of interrupting this process. No then, not with effort, but right away, as if someone turned off an invisible switch inside you. Does it seem exaggerated? Perhaps. But the more honest question is not whether this is possible. The question is, why were we never taught something like this, if negative emotions are daily part of life? We live trying to control how we feel. We pretend to be calm. We swallow words. We distract the mind. We scroll the cell phone screen. We take a deep breath waiting for it to pass. Sometimes it works. Most of the time, no. What no one says is that negative emotions don't need to be fought. They don't come out to attack us. They arise because something inside us has been touched, like the surface of a lake when a stone falls. When we try to fight rough water, we only create more waves. But what if there was a way to make the water calm down on its own? This phrase is not a positive mantra. It is not self-deception. It's not repeating everything will be fine when it clearly doesn't seem like it will. In fact, it works precisely because it doesn't try to convince the mind of anything. She acts before the thought becomes history, before emotion gained a name, before you get lost inside it. And the most curious thing, this sentence does not change the world around you. It changes the place from which you observe the world. People who have learned to use it report something strange at first. A short break. As if, for an instant, time slowed down. The emotion is still there, but it no longer controls everything. It is in this space that something profound happens. Maybe you are thinking, if this were real, everyone would know. But many of the most effective things in life are too simple to seem important. Breathing is simple. Drinking water is simple. Silence is simple. And yet, we forget. Before revealing this phrase, it is necessary to understand something essential. Why do certain emotions kidnap us so quickly? Why does the mind react before we can notice? And why does trying to think positive tend to fail precisely in the most difficult moments? If you've ever felt like you're losing emotional control before you even realize it, if you've ever wondered why some words hurt so much, or why certain thoughts seem to arise on their own, so this video is no coincidence. Before continuing, write in the comments. Which emotion overwhelms you most when it comes out of nowhere? Anxiety, anger, fear, or guilt? Naming this is the first step to changing your relationship with her. In the next block, we will reveal something that almost no one notices. The real reason negative emotions take over so quickly, and why this is not your weakness. But before moving forward, reflect. Why do some emotions seem bigger than us? Who is really in charge when they arise? And what would happen if, instead of fighting, you just changed your position interior? These answers are closer than you might think. There is something that almost no one notices the moment a negative emotion arises. It does not begin in thought. When you realize it, the body has already reacted. The chest tightened, the stomach contracted, a breathing changed. Only then does the mind rush to explain what is happening. This is why it seems so difficult to think differently. When we try to change our thoughts, the emotion is already installed. Imagine walking distractedly along a trail and suddenly hearing a noise in the woods. Before you even identify the sound, your body reacts. The muscles become alert. The heart accelerates. This is not an error. It is an ancient, deep, silent mechanism. Within us there is something that reacts before logic. He doesn't ask. Don't analyze. Don't debate. He just responds. In modern life, the problem is that this same mechanism reacts not only to real dangers, but also to words, memories, looks, expectations, comparisons, and scenarios imagined. The body does not distinguish so well between what is physical and what is symbolic. An unanswered message can sound like a threat. Criticism can feel like outright rejection. A thought about the future can feel like imminent danger. And then the emotion comes. Quick, intense, compelling. The mistake is not in feeling it. The mistake is in believing that this is who we are at that moment. When a negative emotion appears, it occupies the entire space of attention. It's like a dense fog. While we're inside it, everything feels the same, heavy, confused, no way out. We try to think, but thought is born contaminated. Therefore, advice such as calm down, don't think about it, or be rational seem useless. They speak with the mind, when what is active is something deeper. There is an unspoken word for this: contamination. Not in the sense of something wrong, but in the sense of something spreading quickly when there is no space. When there is no interval between stimulus and reaction, emotion takes over everything. It becomes identity. It becomes a narrative. It becomes certain. But watch carefully. No emotion remains if it is not fed. She needs stories, of images, of internal dialogues. Without that, it passes, like a wave that reaches the beach and retreats on its own. What most people lack is not emotional strength, it's internal space. And here's a crucial point. We don't create space by fighting how we feel. We create space by changing the observation point. The phrase that will be revealed later does not try to stop the emotion by force. She acts before the fight, before the explanation, before the trial. It creates a small gap, almost imperceptible, between you and what arises within you. You. And in that crack, something changes. Maybe you've already felt this without knowing how to name it. An instant where the anger was there, but you didn't act. Or the anxiety appeared, but did not grow. Not because you overcame the emotion, but because you didn't mix with it. This ability is not a gift. It's a memory. Why does trying to control emotions often make them stronger? What really happens when we fight what we feel? And what is the silent mistake that almost everyone makes when trying to calm down? In the next block, we will talk exactly about this. The most common, and most invisible, mistake that turns fleeting emotions into internal prisons. When a negative emotion arises, almost everyone reacts the same way, even without realizing it. We try to control your thoughts, control the reaction, control the image we show, control what is happening inside. I wasn't supposed to be feeling this. I need to stop thinking that way. I have to calm down now. These sentences seem sensible, but they hide a silent error. They start from the idea that emotion is an enemy that needs to be defeated. And that's exactly where everything gets worse. Every time you try to expel an emotion, you put yourself in direct confrontation with something that is already active within you. It's like trying to push a door that opens to the other side. The more force, the more resistance. The body does not understand rational orders when it is in a state of alert. He understands threat or security. When you try to force yourself to be calm, the body hears something else. Something is wrong. We need to fix this now. And then he intensifies the reaction. The mind accelerates even more. The heart beats faster. The discomfort grows. Not because the emotion is too powerful, but because you have struggled with it. There is another common error, even more subtle. Try to explain too much what you are feeling. You analyze, remember, create scenarios, builds internal arguments. Emotion thanks you. She feeds on stories. Every thought is like fuel thrown on the fire. Even emotions that started small become huge when they gain narrative. They stop being a sensation and become an identity. I'm anxious. That's the way I am. That always happens to me. But look honestly, you're not anxious all the time. You are not angry all the time. You are not sad all the time. These emotions arise, pass, and arise again. The problem is that when they appear, they take the microphone. The biggest mistake, then, is not feeling. It's getting confused with what is being felt. There is a huge difference between, there is anger in me now, and I am anger. Most people never learn this distinction. So when someone says, just notice what you feel, it sounds too abstract. How can you observe something that seems to be everywhere? Here's the key that almost no one mentions. Observing is not looking from afar. It's not interfering. It's allowing emotion to exist without trying to shape it, explain it, or expel it. And this is not passivity, it's intelligence. When you don't fight, something unexpected happens. The emotion begins to lose strength on its own, not immediately, but naturally, like a wave that breaks when it finds no resistance. The phrase we are approaching requires no effort. She doesn't tell the emotion to go away. She doesn't argue with her mind. She does something much more subtle: remove the fuel. It interrupts the automatic habit of confrontation. And that's why it works when nothing else works. If fighting the emotion makes everything worse, what can you do instead? How to create internal space without effort or control. And why can certain words change our state so quickly? In the next block, you will understand the invisible logic behind the phrase, and why she acts up before you even realize she's calming down. Before revealing the sentence, it is important to understand why words can change an internal state so quick, sometimes faster than taking a deep breath, thinking positive, or get distracted. Words are not just sounds, they are directions. When a negative emotion arises, the mind goes into automatic movement. She begins to look for meaning, causes, culprits, solutions. Everything happens at high speed, with almost no room for choice. But there is something even faster than thought, the meaning we give to things before we even think about them. That's why a single word can soothe or hurt, not because of the sound, but because of the internal place that it activates. Imagine walking through thick fog. You don't see far. He doesn't know exactly where he is. Every step feels unsafe. Now imagine that, in the middle of this fog, someone lights a small flashlight. It doesn't dispel all the fog. It doesn't change the climate. Does not change the path. But it changes where you step. The sentence we are approaching works like this flashlight. It does not eliminate emotion. It doesn't solve the problem. It does not promise happiness. It just changes the exact point from which you observe what is happening. And that makes all the difference. Most emotional techniques attempt to act after the emotion has already become history, when you are already stuck in thoughts, justifications, and reactions. This sentence acts before the story. She doesn't talk to the drama. She doesn't try to convince fear. She doesn't compete for space with anxiety. It simply changes the frame. There is a natural principle that almost no one observes. Everything that is observed without resistance loses intensity. Think about the wind. When you run against him, you feel strength. When it stands still, it passes. Think about water. When you try to hold it tight, it slips away. When you open your hand, it rests. The same happens with emotions. The problem is that on a daily basis, we react automatically. Not because we want to, but because we learn that way. From an early age, we were taught to control, repress, correct. Little was said about allowing. Allowing is not agreeing. It's not surrendering. It's not giving up. Allowing is recognizing what is present without mixing with it. The phrase that will be revealed is not an order. It is not a command to the body. It is not a request to the mind. It is an observation. And findings have a curious power. They do not demand a response. When you see something simple and true, the mind has nothing to argue with. She pauses. And in this pause, the body feels safe. That's why this phrase works right away. Not because it's magic, but because it doesn't provoke internal conflict. It does not create a new layer of effort. It removes a layer of tension. Maybe you're expecting something elaborate, something too deep, something that sounds spiritual. But the simpler a sentence is, the deeper it can touch. Nature doesn't scream. She whispers. And what comes next is a whisper, not to change who you are, but to remember where you are when the emotion arises. What type of phrase does not generate resistance in the mind? Why can realizing something simple be more powerful than trying to change everything? And what, after all, is this simple phrase that creates immediate space? In the next block, the phrase will finally be revealed, and you will understand exactly how to use it at the exact moment when everything starts to get out of control. Now finally, the sentence. It is not accompanied by a complex ritual, does not require specific posture. It does not depend on belief, faith, or deep concentration. It works because it is too simple for the mind to discuss. The sentence is, this is also happening. Just that. No more words. No attempt to change how you feel. No promise that it will pass quickly. The strength of this sentence is in the verb tense. Not in the future. Not in the past. Not now. When a negative emotion arises, what makes it so intense is not just the sensation, is the silent idea that this shouldn't be happening. There is an invisible resistance, an internal refusal, an automatic no. And all resistance creates tension. When you say internally, this is also happening, something subtle shifts. You don't agree with the emotion. You don't fight it. You simply recognize the reality of the moment. And the mind, surprisingly, relaxes, because there is no more conflict. This sentence doesn't try to calm you down. She doesn't say everything is fine. She doesn't deny the discomfort. It only includes what is present, and inclusion creates space. Think of a cramped room full of stacked furniture. When you try to push everything, it becomes harder to move. When you just open a window, air comes in. The sentence is that window. Node. When anxiety appears, try. Don't explain. Don't analyze. Don't project. Just notice the sensation in your body and say, silently or in a low voice, this is also happening. Nothing more. If anger arises, same thing. If fear appears, the same internal gesture. If sadness comes, don't change anything. The phrase is not to eliminate emotion. It's to undo the fusion with her. When you say this is also happening, you stop being the emotion and start being. Be the space where it happens. And that changes everything. For the first few uses, you may find it strange. It may seem like nothing has changed. But watch carefully. There is almost always a short break, a minimum range, as if the body realizes that it doesn't need to fight. The emotion is still there, but it no longer screams. She speaks more quietly. This phrase does not solve external problems. It solves something more essential. The internal urgency. Without urgency, emotion does not grow. Without growth, it passes. It is important to understand when to use it. Do not use after you are completely lost in thought. Use on first signal, at the first contraction of the body, at first chest tightness, at the first impulse to react. This is the golden moment. And here's a key detail. Do not repeat the phrase like an anxious mantra. Say it once, with presence, as if confirming a simple fact. This is also happening. And stay. Feel the body. Observe your breathing. Don't expect a specific result. The phrase doesn't work for you. It makes room for something natural to happen. What changes when you use this phrase repeatedly throughout the day? Why does it start to work faster and faster over time? And how does this transform the way you react to people and life? In the next block, we will talk about the silent changes that arise when this phrase becomes part of your daily life. Changes that you don't force, but that start to happen on their own. At first, the phrase seems like just a small internal gesture, almost nothing visible, almost nothing measurable. But, over time, something curious starts to happen. Negative emotions still arise, because they are part of the human experience. But they no longer arrive like unexpected storms. They arrive like clouds that you recognize from a distance. You start to notice the beginning, the first sign on the body, the first change in breathing, the first automatic impulse, and, at this exact point, the sentence appears alone. This is also happening, not as effort, not as a technique, like silent habit. The most obvious result is not staying calm all the time. That would be unrealistic. What changes is something deeper. You react less and respond more. Before, one crossed word could dominate the entire day. Now it still rings, but it doesn't settle. Before, One negative thought could trigger an endless sequence of others. Now it appears and finds no fertile ground, because the phrase creates something rare, space between stimulus and reaction. In this space, you realize choices that didn't exist before. Stay silent, breathe, change the subject. Don't respond immediately, or even respond, but without venom. Over time, people around you notice something different. They don't know how to explain, but they feel. You seem less reactive, less predictable, less captured by the same old emotions. That doesn't make you cold, makes you present. Anxiety loses strength because it depends on haste. Anger dissolves because it depends on confrontation. Guilt weakens because it depends on mental repetition. The sentence does not eliminate these emotions. She removes the stage, and without a stage, they don't perform. Another curious effect appears. You start to trust time more. Before there was an urgency to resolve everything from within. Now there is permission to feel without resolving, and that changes important decisions. You avoid impulsive responses, avoid promises made under pressure, avoid conflicts that previously seemed inevitable. Not because you got better, but because it became more spacious. With this space, something even more subtle emerges, a feeling of internal alignment, as if you are no longer at war with yourself. And perhaps the most beautiful of all, the phrase starts to work, even when you forget to use it consciously. The body learns, the mind learns, the entire system learns that it doesn't need to go into alarm every time. This doesn't happen overnight, but it happens. And when it happens, you realize that it's not just about neutralizing emotions negative, it's about living without being dragged by them. If you have ever experienced a moment in which you reacted differently than usual, in which he felt the emotion but was not carried away by it, tell us in the comments what changed in that situation. Stories like this help other people to realize that this change is possible. What exists behind this space that comes after the sentence? Is the phrase destiny or just a door? And what happens when silence becomes part of the way you live? In the next and final block, let's go through this door calmly and look at what remains after the emotion passes. There is a very specific moment that is almost never observed. It happens after the emotion passes. It's not immediate relief. It's not the distraction. It's that silent moment when everything seems normal again. Most people go through this moment without realizing it. Run to the next task, on to the next thought, on to the next concern. But when you start using the phrase, when it creates space instead of confrontation, that moment changes quality. It becomes a place. An internal place where there is no urgency, where nothing needs to be resolved now, where you simply are. It is in this space that something profound reveals itself. You are not what passes by you. Emotions come, sensations change, thoughts arise and disappear. But there is something that remains watching all this happen. The phrase, "this is also happening," does not create this observer. She just points at him, like a finger indicating the moon. If you confuse your finger with the moon, you miss the essential point. If you use the phrase as a trick to feel better, it becomes just another technique. But if you understand what comes after the sentence, the silence, the presence, the simple being, then something starts to rearrange itself inside. You stop seeking total control, stop demanding emotional coherence, stop demanding internal perfection. And interestingly, this is where balance emerges. Not a rigid balance, but a living balance. Flexible, human. The sentence is a door, not destiny. She takes you to this space where life happens without excessive narration, where the body knows what to do, where the mind rests for a while. And the more you visit this space, the less you need the phrase, because what she points out starts to become familiar. Maybe this is what we call peace, not absence of emotions, but absence of internal war. And now, one last reflection. What if negative emotions weren't the enemy? What if they were just natural movements like wind, rain, changing weather, time? And if suffering wasn't in the emotion itself, but in the way we hold on to it? The sentence doesn't answer everything, but open a wiretap. And this listening changes the way you walk through life. If this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel. Here, we are not looking for quick answers. We seek spaces where the soul can breathe. After an emotion passes, who do you feel remains? Write in the comments. This question often reveals more than it seems. And take this with you. Maybe what we call self-control is just the ability not to interrupt the silence that arises when we stop fight. What if what we call destiny, it's just the whisper of something invisible who has always been here, waiting to be heard?